Award, as well as both the Queen Elizabeth Diamond and Platinum Jubilee medals for service to his community. So Dave, well done, and let's give him a good anchor welcome.
Unmute. There we go. How's everybody doing? Good. You are a fine group of people. Normally at conferences, right after lunch, people are taking naps somewhere, but it seems like everyone actually came back. Good job. Fine group of people. The speakers that we've had today have been wonderful. Thanks, Pastor Ken, for laying foundation this morning. Wonderful. Kevin and I, we've known each other in the internet world for over 10 years. Pre-social media, we were OG bloggers together. We were a part of a small, sarcastic Christian community that blogged back in the day, and so we met each other back then, and the first time we've actually been in the same room together today, so thanks for that. John Massamy, when he was in Brantford, so we have a mutual atheist friend who's a website designer, who one day came to me and he said, "How come my favorite priest and my favorite pastor don't know each other?" And so he brokered a coffee, and so John and I have connected quite a bit over the years, and really appreciate John and all that you have done and continue to do. So round of applause for our speakers so far. All right, I'm going to tell you a bit of my story, a bit of the Dave story. It's an interesting story. It's got some elements to the story that are unique, we'll just say. So this is my family. I'm the big fat guy in the back. There you go. My son Jared is the tall one. He's 20. And then I have two girls. In this crowd is my wife over on the far side. My brother there in the middle, Rick, pastors Portico Church in Mississauga. He pastors one of the biggest churches in the country, and I pastor one of the smallest ones in the country. So my brother-in-law Aaron down there works for the Bible League, works along with Norm, and my sister is a missionary on Mercy Ship for a lot of years. And so we have a wonderful family who love serving Jesus, love going and making the world a better place and changing the world. And I have to introduce you to this thing that took over my life somehow over 10 years ago. I'm going to tell you the story, but I'd like you to meet Captain Kindness. It's the hero shot. I've done this laugh, this goofy, ridiculous laugh, I'm going to say 150,000 times over the last 10 years of my life. I was a seemingly ordinary, normal person who a superhero somehow usurped my life. And kindness became, I didn't ask for my life to be surrounded by kindness. I didn't ask for this word to both be a blessing and to haunt me. I cannot escape kindness. Kindness is my life somehow. And it's ironic because when I was in high school, I was actually a bully. I was not a very kind person. I had to go, when I became Captain Kindness, I had many people who I had to send messages to, or they sent to me, "Hey, Dave, you remember you weren't that kind." I had to go, "Whoopsie doodle, isn't this ironic?" Captain Kindness. Let me tell you the story. Let me tell you the story about where Captain Kindness came from, because the origin stories of superheroes are very, very important. If you know, the first superhero movies are always the best because you get to find out why they became what they are. So, I was born and raised Brantford, Ontario. Anybody else from Brantford? How many Brantford people? You have numbers of Brantford people? People who hoot and hollered when they said 2 doors down, you knew that was Brantford folks. So, this is the downtown I grew up with. This is what it looked like. This was, Brantford was a blue-collar city. Massey Ferguson was there, lots of blue-collar jobs. 70s, 80s hit, lots of blue-collar jobs, left town, downtown fell to pieces. In fact, it got so bad that at one point, Silent Hill, have you ever seen, how bad was it? Very nice. Good. Someone back there knows Johnny Carson jokes, so very good, very good. Weird, wild stuff. Okay. Has anybody ever seen the movie Silent Hill? You shouldn't admit it if you had. Give me a wink and a nod. You ever seen? All right, Kevin, perfect. You're my kind of people. Silent Hill is a movie about a post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland. I told Kevin that was not going to be the first time we heard the word post-apocalyptic today. Silent Hill, we're filming this movie in Ontario. Where in Ontario can we go to that looks like a post-apocalyptic zombie wasteland? And they thought, Brantford, bingo. And they barely had to do any touch-ups. Like, that was actually sort of what it looked like. So I grew up going to church. Mom was a faithful Christian, still is a faithful Christian. I was a really, really good heathen for a lot of years. I was excellent at being a heathen. I was one of the best. I was on the all-star team. And my mom was a faithful mom who I knew every night when I was 17, 18, 19, when I was out getting drunk. My mom, I knew she was praying for me because she told me. Uh, and she was still up praying for me when I got home from doing whatever I was doing. So she prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed. I came to Jesus for real, that stuck when I was 19 years old, and I'm like, I know what this means. I'm going to serve Jesus with my life. I knew what it was going to mean, and I was ready to be able to go, God, I will go anywhere and do anything. Lord, take me, lead me, wherever you want me to go. And so I did what most good, young, zealous evangelicals do. You go to Africa, right? That's what you're supposed to do. That's sort of the deal. And so my wife and I, we got married. We got married young. We were 21 years old, and in the year 2000, we sold the farm. Actually, we just let our bad apartment go, and we went to West Africa. So we were serving Jesus in West Africa. This is my friend Albert, who runs a ministry called Torchbearers. It's a small church planting organization. I went there with baseball, and I was teaching baseball leagues in West Africa. And Albert, who cannot throw a baseball, eventually became the president of baseball in Ghana. So the program was on the low end of the scale. At one point, they asked if I wanted to come back and be the coach of the Olympic team. And I thought, no, I'm not. Cool Runnings is not going to be my story. This is not where I'm headed with my life. So I went there, and we were there for 6 months, 6.5 months. Paul and Judy Sherratt are lovely longtime friends and helped launch us to go and do this. We were young, and we were all excited, and I'm like, let's go change the world. And I got there, and you walk down the street in Accra, Ghana, you walk past a schoolhouse. There's 3 churches inside the school and one under the tree, and I'm like, I don't think they need me here. I don't think you guys are doing a pretty darn good job without goofy young Dave here trying to be able to play baseball. And so I got a little bit frustrated, actually. I was a little bit frustrated. I'm like, why did I come here, God? Why did we go all the way across the world? And I started to realize that he wanted to speak to me about his character. The character, the folks that I met in Accra, Ghana, they were the kindest folks that I'd ever met in my life, so much so that it kind of confronted me because Canadians, we aren't cold to each other, but we're also not in each other's lives on purpose like we once were as a culture. There isn't the kind of neighborhoods that we wish that we had. And God began to really challenge me about kindness. This is what it says in Romans 2:4. Or do you show contempt for the riches of his kindness, forbearance, and patience, not realizing that it's God's kindness that is intended to lead you to repentance? We got back, and I realized, okay, we started a church called Freedom House in downtown Brantford. We'll be celebrating 20 years of this church coming up in January, I think, January, February. And as we prayed, we felt like, God, you want us to go outside of the walls. You want us to be able to go and serve the city. We wanted to be agents of transformation in our city. The dream was, how do you get the church outside of the walls? How do you serve the city? How do you bless the city? And then how do you see tangible transformation? I've connection and good friends, become really good friends with Ed Silvoso from Transform Our World. I'm headed out there to see him next week, and his tales of city transformation in Argentina in the 70s and 80s. I thought, if this is for real, this is all I ever want to do for the rest of my life. How do we serve the city? How do we bless the city? And how do we see the kind of on earth as it is in heaven stuff that we've been taught to pray for all this time? And so we thought, kindness, kindness, kindness. The kindness of the Lord leads people to him. We've spent a lot of time over the years going and evangelizing by going, hey, let me tell you, instead of going, hey, how do I serve you? And so we thought, let's see if this actually works. Let me tell you what I've coined my kindness equation. Because kindness, although it seems like a simple word, is kind of a difficult word to define. Kindness actually means showing benevolence. Benevolence is the disposition to do good. Disposition is the predominant tendency of one's spirit, natural, mental, and emotional outlook or mood. I believe, Pastor Ken, you talked about disposition this morning. It's your guts. It's who you are, right? Your disposition is the nature of your spirit. So when you go back up this chain, this definition chain, kindness is actually something good that we do out of something good that we are. Kindness is showing benevolence. The disposition is, benevolence is acting on our disposition. And kindness is actually doing something. Kindness, it can be a state of mind, sure, but it is practically doing something because God's put something inside of us. And that's why there's power. When you use kindness in Jesus' name, things start to happen. In fact, disproportionate things start to happen to what you actually do. So we planted this church in downtown Brantford. We call it the Big Blue House. It was a bar on a Wednesday, and it was a church by Sunday. We bought this, and they were running Coke out of the kitchen. People were turning tricks in the parking lot, and people would heckle us as we came into the neighborhood, and we go, "This is a great place to start this kindness experiment. Perfect, perfect. A neighborhood that needs something, and we can do something." Truly, my talk is going to be far less deep and theological than others have been. I'm a very simple guy with a gift of goofy, and God seems to use it. So we bought this bar, and what we decided to do was start doing, we called it Flippin' Fridays, because you don't title something unless it's funny. So we called it Flippin' Fridays. Problem was, people across the road, running drugs, prostitution. We sat out one night, and we saw kids who were, I'm going to say 8 to 10 years old, on lawn chairs on the street, and the guy who was running the drugs out of this one house, he would kind of whistle. The kids would go up, and they would essentially be drug mules. And they would go up into the house, they would get the drugs, they'd get on their bike, and they'd ride off into the night. And this is in downtown Brantford. It was something that I had never seen before, and I couldn't really even believe happened in cities, let alone my city. You hear stories about it, but I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like local kids. This is what's happening. So we thought, all right, well, let's start an experiment. If the kindness of the Lord leads people to repentance, and the kindness of the Lord changes cultures and changes the atmosphere, let's just do something kind. And so our grand plan was put a barbecue on the street, and I would yell, "Free burgers!" And that was all the planning we put into it. That was our urban planning and missionary strategy, is a goofball yelling free burgers into the midnight sky. And what ended up happening was people would start to come and go, "Free burgers, huh? I would like a free burger." I went, "Okay, well good, I have a free burger for you." That works out perfectly for us. And what ended up happening was conversation after conversation after conversation that led to talks about Jesus that we didn't even instigate. We didn't have to instigate it because they went, "That's a great burger. Tell me about why you are here." And we thought, I would love to tell you about why we are here. It happened every Friday and continued and continued and continued. And we started to see genuine change in the nature of the street because the people who were there all of a sudden were being discipled over a grill on a street. And we were beginning to see people's lives change. And I'll tell you right now that house that ran the drugs out of it is now the head office of the downtown Brantford BIA. The Business Improvement Association is now where that house was. But we didn't do it. We just were curious about what would happen because God's already at work everywhere we go. And so we just get to invite him, and we get to create little situations that invite people to be able to see what God's actually doing. He desperately wants to see our world change. He desperately wants to see it, and not just in churches, but on the streets and in neighborhoods. Desperately wants to. So here's where the good superhero story comes in. So one day, we're sitting out there doing stuff on the street, and we were actually doing what we call the $1 car wash. The $1 car wash is you put up a sign that says $1 car wash. Cars go by, think that's a great deal for a car wash. You pull in, and then you hand them $1, and you say, "This is for the honor of serving you today." And their brains blow up because why would anybody do that? And then we get out and do them up a barbecue, and it turns into amazing conversations, wonderful conversations where you get to talk about neighborhoods and transformation in the city, all kinds of great stuff. Well, one day that we were doing this and the cars weren't stopping, and we said out loud, just a random thought, well, you know what? We need a mascot. That year, the theme in the city's Santa Claus parade was superheroes. And without thinking about it, somebody said, "Hey, we should make Captain Kindness. There is a parade and a float that's themed as superheroes, and we are talking about kindness. Why don't we put Dave in a leotard and throw him up on a flatbed truck and call him Captain Kindness? And that's what happened. I went, wait a second, how did I just become the superhero? Well, we won the award for the best float in the Santa Claus parade that year. And I started to get calls and go, can Captain Kindness come to my school? Can Captain Kindness cut the ribbon on my fish and chip stand? I did a retirement party for the chief legal counsel of the Children's Aid Society, for gosh sakes. All of a sudden, doors that I had no idea that I could ever get into, I'm into, and they're like, this guy's Captain Kindness. And then what would happen is that adults would go, tell me about why you're doing that. And we would talk to them about how do you change cities, and how do you inject kindness into here, there, and everywhere, and how do cities get transformed, and lives get transformed by kindness. It was amazing. One of the neatest things that ever happened was I was on a Wendy's placemat. I was getting texts from people going, I'm eating on your face right now. I was the celebrity spokesperson for the Big Brothers Big Sisters Bowl-a-thon or something like that. And I'm like, how did this happen? How am I Captain Kindness? How did this happen? In fact, for many years, I would have arguments with God and go, God, do I actually have to put this costume on again? And he would say, Dave, are you honestly arguing with the way that I've answered your prayer to see a city transformed? Put on the pads and get in the game. This guy's name is Drew Dudley, works for U of T. He said, if we make leadership about changing the world, we give ourselves an excuse not to expect it. Every day, we would expect it every day from ourselves. How can one act of kindness change the world? Well, there is no world. There's only 6 billion understandings of it. If you change one person's understanding of how powerful an agent of change they can be, you've changed the whole thing. The number of times I've heard people catch on to this kindness can be transformative, and all of a sudden things start to happen, and they go, Dave, it's for real. And I said, yeah, that's why I'm wearing a cape. It means something. In Bible speak, it says, John 1:14, and John referenced this earlier, and the Word became flesh and blood and moved into the neighborhood, and we saw the glory with our own eyes, a one-of-a-kind glory, like Father, like Son, generous from inside and out, true from the start. So we thought, oh, this is amazing. So we said to the city, how do we serve you? We went to our Parks and Rec department because our city was beginning to transform. We had got a university in downtown Brantford. We had just built this big new public square in a place where it was kind of really derelict for a lot of years. And we said, how do we serve you? How do we make you better at your job in the municipality? And they said, well, we have a new square here, and we just created a jazz fest, but we need stuff to go into the square. Can you do stuff? And we said, sure, we're specialty in doing stuff that we don't know what we're doing. That's how we do it. And we say, well, what stuff do you want? And they say, well, how about a winter carnival? And we said, sure, we can do a winter carnival. And then we went home and Googled, what is a winter carnival? Literally how it happened. We found out what a winter carnival is. It's a carnival in the winter. Yeah, it's really tough. The first year we had a llama. I don't know why we thought that was a good idea. This festival, over time, Brantford is ballpark 100,000 people. At one point, we were regularly getting 15,000 people coming into our downtown to a festival that a church of maybe 50, if they all came, was running. It turned into just favor and favor and favor. The guy that ran the carnival rides was a local Brantford guy. And for years, people had begged him for stuff and wanted stuff from him. He saw this, and he came to us after the first year, and he said, I've been looking for somebody that was actually making a tangible change in this downtown. And he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to give you all of the carnival rides for free. I'm going to pay all my employees to run them, and I'm going to give you guys all the money out of these carnival rides. And for a decade, it provided the ability for us to regularly do this, and even if it was minus 40 outside, we weren't going to lose the church. And God just kept on providing and providing and providing for this festival. we started taking extra steps to go, how do we use kindness in our neighborhoods? I have been involved in a number of political campaigns. So we thought, well, what if we did a kindness campaign? So we mapped out about 1,000 houses in my neighborhood of Eagle Place, and we knocked on people's doors. And I said, hi, I'm Dave Carrol from the Kindness Project. There is no Kindness Project. We just call it that because it sounds good. Hi, I'm Dave Carrol from the Kindness Project. You might know me as Captain Kindness. You might know us for the people that do Frosty Fest downtown. And they go, oh, yeah, cool, because we had begun to earn some credibility in the city enough that people knew who we were. And we said, we're in the neighborhood today asking you if you would be kind to your neighbor for a week. And that's all. And their brains would blow up, because why would anybody be doing this? If they said, sure, we'll be kind, we said, can we put a I'm a kind neighbor sign on your front lawn? We did this whole neighborhood in one day, put out about 500 I'm a kind neighbor lawn signs like a political campaign, and then everybody came home from work that day, and the neighborhood was filled with I'm a kind neighbor lawn signs. So we narked out what was happening while this was going on. So I pretended just to be a stranger walking by, and neighbors would come home and go, what's that? You're a kind neighbor? Yeah, I'm a kind neighbor. Some guy said, I'm a kind neighbor. And then the two started talking about, he goes, well, I'll make you a pie, Bill. And Bill goes, great, why don't I cut your grass? And all of a sudden, there were these little kindness things that begun to spark. And we're like, the culture of a neighborhood can be changed because God's always at work. And the kindness of the Lord leads people towards Him. And it's physically transformative. It's physically transformative. So we did what we thought was the next best logical thing. We said, let's hold public baptisms. Yeah, that's awesome, Norm, but that's not how we felt right away. So we had this dream for a bunch of years of, could we hold baptisms in our downtown square, the square that we had spent years serving? Well, I'll tell you, at Frosty Fest, it was a low to no J count. We didn't talk about Jesus at all. When we would serve the city, we still helped our city run our movies, and their movies in the square. They're run by the city. We're honoring our city, and this is not an evangelistic event for us. It's a serve the city. It's serve them. We didn't talk about Jesus when we did these public events. But we did talk about Jesus with the people that were running it because they started asking us about Jesus. So we had this dream of a public baptism. We took out a newspaper ad that said, who's welcome? And it was pimps and prostitutes and fat people, skinny people, winners, losers, and all sort of these inflammatory words. And at the bottom was a coupon for one free baptism. I'm not afraid of creative theological debates, clearly. Scissors and everything. And we thought, well, this will be interesting. Well, the night before, this ad's in the newspaper, full-page ad in our local newspaper. A team is down praying in downtown Brantford. And there was a sex shop down around the corner from where the square was. And the team texts me back, and they show me this picture of our ad up in the window of the sex shop. And at first I thought, some goomba just littered this guy's window. And they said, no, you don't understand. And I can't show this picture because it's filled with pictures of naked people on it. The owner of this sex shop, that their window was filled with naked people, took down the pictures of the naked people, put our ad for a free baptism and who was welcome up in a prominent place on their business, and then put the other posters in behind it. And they put it out front as a declaration of, hey, you're welcome. And I'm like, holy smokes, this is going to be good. The next day, we showed up, and there's people with coupons asking if they can be baptized. And at that point, we did an old-fashioned, here's who Jesus is, here's what the gospel is, come to Jesus, prayed with them, and we baptized over 100 people that day in our downtown. This picture was on the front page of our local newspaper the next day. Hundreds. Baptism attracts hundreds. Cool, eh? It's not my favorite part of the story. My favorite part of the story is that as this was going on, we were working with our member of parliament to put on an outreach, like a fundraising event called Hockey Night in Brantford. We were the head of the committee working with him to be able to go and do this game where we'd bring NHL guys and ex-NHL guys, and Doug Jarvis was going to come, and all these guys, and it was a fundraiser for the Brant United Way. And so we were leading this committee because years ago we had gone to our local leaders and said, how do we serve you? And then we were just kind. And so they went, cool, great. Nobody's just kind and wants to be able to serve and help. And so we rose to the point where they would trust us with running their charity hockey game. Well, the hockey game is on the Wednesday or Thursday. The baptism happens on the Sunday. The picture of us in the pool happens on Monday. So that day, we were about to have a Hockey Night in Brantford meeting with all of the dignitaries in town, our local political leaders, all of our local business leaders, police chief, fire chief. We were in our member of parliament's backyard, and we're driving there going, we may have just gone from the kindness people to the religious freaks. Let us be warned, because all of a sudden, we're baptizing people in the square. Well, we walk in that meeting, we talked about hockey for 10 minutes, and we talked about Jesus for an hour and a half, and we didn't bring it up. All of these local leaders are like, oh, that was really, really interesting. Yeah, really good event. My mom prays for me. I used to go to church when I was, and they started talking to us about Jesus unprovoked. You see, because the kindness of the Lord opens doors and leads people to repentance and can change lives and can change neighborhoods and can change a lot of stuff. Let me tell you one more really amazing story. The most amazing thing that I think I've been witness to is Captain Kindness that I did nothing to provoke. In fact, even the organizers of this thing did nothing to provoke, and they had no idea what God had in store by doing act of kindness. I got a call. The Transform Our World guys did a documentary on us at one point, and Captain Kindness and the city and blah, blah, blah. And so we started to get people calling and going, hey, talk to me about how do you use kindness in your city, yada, yada, yada. So a guy in Minnesota who I didn't know, he was a Assemblies of God guy. He called me and said, hey, would you, we're doing like an outreach event, like a kindness carnival. Would you come to Minnesota and be Captain Kindness at our thing? And I'm like, you can just buy a costume, man. It's way cheaper than flying me to Minnesota. And he said, no, I want you to come and then speak to the church afterwards. And I said, all right, it's your dime, pal. I'll go to Minnesota. Never been there. So I get to the airport. The Assemblies of God guy's youth dude picks me up at the airport, and youth guy drives me to the place where they're doing this carnival. Well, he drives me to the front lawn of this huge Catholic church. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I thought this was a Assemblies of God thing. And he goes, yeah. We'll explain to you in a bit. And so I suited up and put on my leotard and walked out. And what we started to happen was this, bouncy castles over here, people playing soccer on the lawn. They're doing all this different stuff. And I realized that most of the community that was there were Mexican immigrants. And so I went over to the pastor that I knew just a little bit. I said, what's happening here? Why are we at the Catholic Church? I feel like there's more to this story. He goes, oh, didn't I tell you? I said, no, that's why I'm asking. And he goes, well, here's the thing. He said, my church for years, this was our precious outreach. This was the thing that we did, that we were like, this is our anchor event. Pun intended. Norm got me the biggest laugh there. And he said, we started to think about kindness and about how do you work together in community and listening to some of the stuff you're encouraging. And he said, I felt like God say, reach out to the local Catholic parish and see if they want to do this event with you. And he's like, oh, God, this is our church's thing. We're known for this. And what they would do is they would work along with the police department, and they would find the families that were in the lower income area, and then they would invite them to this carnival. And it was like a backpacks, a back-to-school carnival thing where you give backpacks. And so he's like, okay, I'm going to take a step of faith out here, and we'll function in unity and in kindness and build this bridge. So the pastor goes to the priest and says, hey, we want to be able to invite you to do this. And the priest goes, oh, yeah, it's a good idea, but we have to do it at our church. The pastor goes, a great idea. Sure. The priest goes, yeah, we would need to give our literature out, not yours, and I would need to deliver the message from the transport truck. And the Assemblies of God pastor is gritting his teeth going, yeah, sure, let's do it. The night before, the churches met in the Assemblies of God gym to be able to stuff the backpacks, because you got to be able to stuff with all the pencils and accoutrement that you put in the bags. And it's like a grade 8 dance in there, all the Protestants on one side and all the Catholics on the other. Never the twain shall meet in the middle. And the pastor and the priest are standing there in the middle and going, oh, this is an interesting dynamic. And so they start making small talk. And the pastor says to the priest, he said, the Mexican community is really excited about tomorrow. And he goes, whoa, sorry, you invited the Mexican community? And he said, yeah, this is who we do this carnival for. And he said, we don't have anyone from the Mexican community in our parish. And in fact, there's bad blood between this church and the local Mexican community. He goes, I don't want to get into it, but there's a huge rift. And he goes, well, they can't. How's this going to work? He goes, I don't know, but they're coming to your house tomorrow. And so as he's telling me this story, I'm watching this amazing scene roll out of a community that was separated, and Protestants and Catholics serving together, serving ice cream bars and running bouncy castles. I watched the priest get up to deliver his message at the end of this, and he could barely make it out, barely get words out of his mouth. He was so choked up, he couldn't believe what was happening. And as we're standing there, I'm watching denominational divides fall down and racial barriers just dissolve. These two churches still do this together, and it's their together most treasured event. Well, for kindness. Over little acts of kindness. The kindness of the Lord leads people to repentance. It changes the culture of streets. It changes racial divides. It's not just something goofy that we do. It's actually an act to be able to invite God to be able to do miracles. It's true. So let me wrap up by encouraging you and discouraging you. I like to discourage people. It's one of my gifts. I'm going to discourage you in the way that all of the other speakers have discouraged us all in many of the different ways so far. It would be great if I could say, and because of all this stuff, over the last 3 years of COVID, it went super great. It did not go super great. Just like we've heard over and over and over today, it has been a very tough 3 years. I'd love to be able to say that every time you do an act of kindness, massive things will happen. Nah, actually, you got to have a lot of quantity to have a few good quality stories. Quantity over quality is the way that it works. Some nights, you're just standing out there in the street thinking, why am I doing this? Some nights you find yourself in a leotard going, what in the world is happening? And sometimes you find yourself within your family or on your street going, I don't even know where to start, and it just seems so silly, stupid, and small for me to just go cut grass. But it's not what's happening. I'll encourage you that even in our situation, I'll tell you, some of those things that I talked about, they don't exist anymore. Frosty Fest doesn't exist anymore. And you know why? Because COVID changed everything. It changed the economics of the carnival industry. It changed some of the dynamics of our downtown. It changed some of the people who were in leadership at the city. It changed some of the sponsors' ability to be able to come in. And I could list you about 14 different reasons why Frosty Fest wouldn't work right now. And it's why I always tell people when they ask if they should do a winter carnival, I tell them, no, do not do that. That is a terrible, terrible idea. It only ever worked because of the principle of going, God, how do you want us to serve our city and find the needs that are right in front of us? How do we ask those questions to the people who we want to be able to see the kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven? That's the only reason why it worked. It's the only reason why it worked. If you tried to do it in your city today and you said, I just want to try and jam this in here and come up with just this plan that, because, goofball with a big ear talked about it at the conference. No, don't do it. It won't work. What will work is go, where do I care about? Where is the areas of influence that I want to be able to get into? What's my heart for my city? I've got a guy in my church, he does model trains. He loves model trains more than I ever knew people could like a model train. I don't get it. I don't understand it. And I will never care that much about model trains. But this dude loves it. And so I encourage him all the time. How do you use kindness in your model train club? What can you do to be able to serve them? How do you do that? And do it in Jesus' name and watch what ends up happening. This is why, to me, there were moments over the last number of years where the things that we had done practically and the things that we had even been able to tell stories all over the place, I'm like, well, they don't exist anymore, so who am I? Have my existential, am I actually Captain Kindness, or was I just peddling something? Well, what do we do? And I felt like God say, Do what you've always done. Pray and go and serve. What's the next thing you want them to go and serve? Is this recorded? Is this recorded here? But it's okay. Well, by the time anyone else sees it, it'll be done. So, Frosty Fest can't happen. A bunch of these different things couldn't happen during COVID. Things have changed, and so we were in the middle of praying. What in the world are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to function today? Right after last year, so I was the head of our local Canada Day celebration. So I was the head of that committee. It's great to be a head of these committees because you don't actually have to do anything. You just run the meetings, and all the people who know what they're doing do all the stuff, and I go, great job, everybody. So chairing committees is the way to go if you're going to be on one. Well, last year, the Santa Claus parade in our city, it almost didn't happen because COVID changed stuff. And service groups, I don't know whether you realize, but many service groups that have run many of the anchor things in our communities, like the parades and the fireworks and all these different things, were ravaged by COVID. And volunteers, we went from this organization that ran our Santa Claus parade, going from a robust group that was doing a lot in town to 2 members over COVID. People just didn't return. And they had to sheepishly go to the city and say, hey, listen, we can't do the parade. And the city's like, well, we got to have the parade. It's one of the things that our city loves the most. And so last year, we cobbled together a committee. They called me to chair the committee. Great job. Also, because I do the local TV. I'm the play-by-play. I'm the Ryan Seacrest for the Santa Claus parade. We cobbled together this parade. Nobody knew it was by the skin of our teeth and almost didn't happen because we all just assume everything's the same as it used to be, but it's not. After the parade's done, I got a call from the city of Brantford, and they said, hey, Dave, do you guys want a parade? I went, huh? And they said, nobody wants to run the parade. He said, we talked to the other service groups. They don't want to do the parade. The city doesn't want to do a parade because it's Christmas and it's too religious. And the religious people are afraid of Santa Claus. I don't know what we're afraid Santa's going to do to us, but and all of a sudden, it's something that is too religious for the city and too secular for the church. And I said, that's my wheelhouse right there. And so this coming year, our church, that has also taken the same kind of COVID hits that so many of our churches have, and that we're trying to restore hope. We're trying to do these things that we're talking about today. We're also going to be the ones running our local Santa Claus parade, and we're going to get a chance to talk about St. Nicholas and the marvelous man of faith that he was. And all of a sudden, the parade, I don't know how we're going to transform it, but the people, there's 140 floats there, and we're praying about how do we bless all the different businesses and charities and nonprofits that put floats in that parade. How do we do that? And I don't know how we're going to do it, but I know that God will do it because the kindness of the Lord changes stuff. It just does. It just does. And it keeps on doing it even in the hard times. Close with this scripture. Hey, I made it. 3 minutes, 14 seconds. Take that, clock. I did it. Mark 12, 28, 31. One of the teachers of the law came and heard them debating, noticing that Jesus had given them a good answer. And he asked them, hey, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart and mind, soul, and strength. And the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commitment greater than these. In our church, our slogan, our motto is love God, love others, the rest is gravy. Do not get caught in the gravy. We have had a season of a lot of gravy in the church. There have been a lot of mucky gravy arguments that when you get caught messing around in the gravy of life, you get covered in gravy. That's bad. He says, simplify it. You don't have to think too much. Love God, love others, and let the rest of it just be over there, like Kevin talked about this morning. Focus on the things we're supposed to. Function kindly. It's something good that you do out of something good that you are, and you have the same superpower inside of you to be able to go and change cities. So I hope this is generating some hope.
Well,